Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by the multi-award-winning and multi-best-selling author of over a half dozen novels. His one of the more recent adult novels, the instant New York Times horror movie, and the instant New York Times best-selling Another, which we're going to be talking more about tonight. That's right, it's your favorite writer of mine, Paul Tremblay. Paul, how the heck are you?
Good, like you, fall tired. I just
All
got back from
tired.
Telluride like a day and a half ago, so I'm still, I guess, fighting a little bit of jet lag. Yeah, it's like 2 hours difference.
How many events are you now doing typically? Because it seems like if you look at your Instagram, you're always somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's been like once a week for like September, October, but it's gonna calm down after, the nice thing is having like the built-in sort of horror season, which is why I don't think I would ever want to have a horror book like released in September, October, because I feel like if you have it released earlier in the year, you get like a built-in second crack at it. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's been, between the return to school, even though I'm part-time, and some event stuff, yeah, it's busy.
Um, so I want to start with, and I mentioned this in the green room because well, first of all, for people who don't know, horror movie, which was your most recent, I guess, adult novel,
Yeah.
was published. God, was this published last year or 2 years ago? 2 years ago.
Last year. Yeah,
Last year?
last
Okay.
summer. And actually the trade paperback just came out in August, so it's still somewhat fresh-ish.
Okay. But right around that time, we had a different edition, which
Yeah.
was like this special independent bookstore exclusive edition, which was green, has green edges. In fact, this is red, so I have like the Christmas editions.
I
Um,
love it. Thank you.
how did like can you talk about how this came about? Because again, this is, the idea of like a special bookstore exclusive edition. I don't say it's probably not the very first time something like this has happened,
Yeah.
but and I feel like with the success of this, because I feel like, people were like flocking to their indie bookstores. In fact, I at my local independent Midtown Scholar, I think there was one left, which I
Yeah.
was able to snag. Um, I don't know. In my gut, I feel like, more publishers are going to be doing this. It's a really great, thing to try to get people to
Yeah.
go to their local indies on independent bookstore day. But can you talk a little bit about just like how this came about?
Yeah, I mean, this one was like all from my publisher. If we backtrack to horror movie, the first iteration of the hardback, had the red sprayed edges, and I had also asked because I'd seen other friends and writers like Sarah Langan and Stephen Graham Jones get like a Barnes and Noble like exclusive edition. So that ended up happening, and I think my publisher, very wise, he was like, "Oh, we don't want to leave the indies out too." So, they pitched, "Hey, why don't we do this, indie bookstore limited edition, and it would first be available on Indie Bookstore Day, which is April. I forget the April day that it actually is. But no, I thought it was a wonderful idea. Really, the only thing I had to do was sign all the tip sheets, for those
How many
books.
copies?
I think it was 4,000 was what they
Okay.
printed. Um, yeah, it's funny how fast trends in publishing moves already. Like, so with my next adult novel come out next year, my agent asked if they're going to do the sprayed edges thing. And my editor was like, no, that's already sort of getting oversaturated. And
Yeah.
that like the romance publishers are sort of dominating that sort of side of things, I guess. I don't know. But like I've seen sprayed edges on like Joe Hill's new one, or not new one, but the reissue of his short story collection. But I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets to the point where if everyone has sprayed edges, it kind of loses its luster.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as I can tell, I mean, the only thing besides obviously there's some tip-in sheets of that you signed of this
Yeah.
versus actually I have the Barnes Noble edition one, so
Yeah.
if I don't know, what did you do that was exclusive for
Yeah,
Barnes
so the
Noble of
Barnes and
this?
Noble one had like fun end pages that were actually sort of faux
Oh
annotated,
yeah. People who not
faux,
see, if you
yeah,
can see, you can kind of see that's
yeah. Those are
mm,
screenplay pages from the book, and then my wife and I wrote notes as though she was pretending to be Cleo, writing the notes in the margins of that. I also there was a sort of like a liner notes that was unique to it, and also like I think I wrote an essay about not cursed films, but my favorite sort of overlooked films. So yeah, there ended up being
Yeah,
like
there's a lot in here, like
a
the
good chunk
DVD
of extras.
extras,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the DVD extras, and underappreciated movies. But okay, well, that's cool. And then for I don't know if you for whatever reason, I just noticed this. The the title is
oh yeah.
larger for the
I
indie
hadn't
one
noticed that before. Yeah,
than the author name. So
yeah,
that's but anyway, very, very cool. And yeah, so speaking of well, horror movies, I don't know, it's a weird transition, but let's before we get into the newest, I guess, novel,
yeah.
your middle grade book that came out this year. Let's talk about the big
Mm,
anthology in the room.
yeah,
The one that Brian Keene and Chris Golden put together, The End of the World as We Know It. Um, I remember when Brian told me about this. They must have just signed the deal because my wife and I went out with him and Mary to dinner, and sometimes Brian likes to wait to just drop news. And at one point he says to me, "Have you have you ever read the st or what did he say?" She's like, "Are you familiar with the Stand by Stephen King?" And I'm
yeah,
like, yeah.
yeah,
What are you talking about?" And then he told me about, he's like, me and Chris were, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow. And I knew at the time, like this was going to be a big book. And, it turned out to, in fact, do you remember, I was telling Chris at AuthorCon, um, do you remember the book 999 that
yes.
actually, I think it was actually your publisher had published back at like 2000
Was
or
it Al
1999 or whatever?
Sorrentino or something?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that was the last big, big, big anthology. For people who don't
Hmm.
remember, it was stocked full of these, Stephen King was in it and a bunch of other authors. It was really thick. And
Yeah.
um and then of course, we had this one come out and this was big. So can you talk a little bit about your, like I guess like how the story came about?
Yeah. So when Chris and Brian approached me, geez, was it like the summer of 23 or something like that, I think? If that's when they originally first had the idea. I was like, yeah, hell yeah. Like without hesitation. But as soon as they said yeah, I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Because The Stand for me was like that book really turned me into a reader. Also, like right before that, I was graduating college and I had to fulfill an English requirement. So I took, basically like a Lit 101. And, I have to credit that class too, because in that class I read some stories from Joyce Carol Oates and T.C. Boyle that really blew my mind. But shortly after that class, when I was 22, my wife bought me The Stand for my birthday, inhaled it. And then when I went away for 2 years for grad school, we did the long distance relationship thing. That's when I fell in love with reading. Anyway, so The Stand is like, really this super important book. So important that I had never reread it. I'd reread a bunch of King books, but not The Stand. So, I reread it by listening to the audio, and really my only way into the story was to think, well, Brian made sure to mention that he was treating the unabridged version as canon, which meant that the Superflu hit in the summer of '91. So I was like, oh, the summer of '91. I know a couple of characters who were hanging around in the summer of '91, and those are two characters that appeared in my novel, The Pallbearers Club. So it was sort of like a fun for me to be like, oh, I could have these two characters be in like an alternate universe version of themselves, and stick them into Stephen King's universe. So that was sort of uh, how that story started for me.
Was that, did you, because I remember, I think I talked to Jonathan Jantz and he had an initial, I mean, for people who are not aware, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but having talked to other authors who have done this and having talked to Brian as well, um, like you just didn't sit down and write a story. You basically had to like send them a pitch. Like this is what the type of story I want to write because they wanted to make sure, obviously, whatever story you were going to do, you weren't
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
waste
yeah.
your time and another writer's time to do something very similar. So did you initially have other ideas, or was this right out of the gate the idea that you had and the one that ended up being in the anthology?
Yeah, it took me like a minute or two, but that was the main one. And that was the one I wanted to do. I did send a backup one, which Chris didn't like, which was fine. That was probably more the purpose of sending the backup one. But no, in my head, it was always going to be the story that ended up in the anthology.
And so, for people who have not read the anthology yet, it's broken down into mainly three parts. There are four parts, but there's one that's part one, with stories before the events of the stand, and then part two, The Long Walk, I guess during when everyone's going out to either Vegas or
Yeah.
at the was it is it Boulder? It's been a while. Boulder,
Boulder. Yeah,
Colorado, is
yeah.
that?
Yep.
And then finally, kind of part three after the stand, and then again, there's part four, which is once you read the anthology, I guess you understand what that means.
Yeah.
But so at the time, did they explain how they were going to kind of structure the anthology? Because you've been in a ton of anthologies, so
Yeah.
you usually know how this stuff works. Like, did you have an idea that, okay, this is a story that's probably going to be somewhere in the middle of the anthology, or was that
Um,
something that didn't really come into mind, as you were
yeah,
doing?
they didn't mention the different sections. I think part of that was, their job to see what people were thinking and try to, maybe guide some people in one direction or the other. Um, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that my book or my story ended up being slightly past toward the middle. So I mean, I think a big bunch of the stories were obviously set when the super flu hit. Um, but which makes sense. I mean, because I mean, I think it almost mirrors sort of the book itself. Like the big start of the book is all about the different characters who survive, and then they all ultimately get together, etc. So that was pretty cool how the anthology itself, sort of mirrored the journey of King's novel.
And you've obviously known King for a while. He's part of a lot of your stuff. I guess would we say you're friends with him? I mean, I don't want to get into your
Sure, he
friend
called
group
me a
there,
friend.
but I
He
mean,
called me a friend publicly
you know
once.
him. I guess I would
Yeah,
say.
a little bit.
So even people who know him have told me that having worked on this anthology, they still got very nervous because, again, you have written and published a lot of short stories and been in a lot of different anthologies. But I have to assume that something like this is a little bit different.
Yeah,
There might be like some added pressure involved because just like the type of world you're stepping foot into, and then the
yeah.
fact that this is something that he is going to be reading with probably more of a critical eye than just the normal eye.
Sure. Oh, of course. Yeah, I was a little nervous, and particularly since, part of the genesis of my story was, hey, Stephen wrote this in the 70s, even though it's about the early 90s. And I wanted my story to reflect more of the politics of the two characters who are Gen Xers essentially. And obviously, maybe they don't live past a certain age because of, what happens in the stand. But yeah, part of my story was actually messing around a little bit with the idea that things are so, you know, black and white with what's good and what's evil. And so, of course, I was a little nervous with that because, I wouldn't want Stephen to think I was in any way taking a shot at the original book because, that certainly wasn't what was intended. He sent me a nice email saying he really enjoyed the story, so that was very cool.
Yeah, very cool. And of course, if people have not checked it out yet, it is The End of the World as We Know It. Stories, new tales of Stephen King's The Stand. The title was, did they, I don't know, the title of the story, can you tell us what the title of the story is?
The story
You
I
don't remember?
tell
Hold on,
is,
I'll look it up
yeah,
here.
I know it's a long title. Because
It's
I've been
the story I tell is the story of some of
of some of
us.
us, yeah. Because when I've been
Was
signing,
that
when I've
one
been,
that like, yeah,
I was just saying
was
when I've been
that from the
signing when I've
very,
been signing the book, I've been saying like this one is for you too. So I keep
okay.
forgetting what the title is now. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your question.
So no, is the basically was that just the title from the very beginning, or did that change? Maybe Chris or
Yeah,
Brian had some type of
that was
suggestion
the
to tweak it.
that was the title pretty early on. I don't know about how you work, but like I hate writing things without titles. It makes me crazy. Uh, you know, um, Especially novels. I'll never write a novel without a title again. I only did it once. Um, Short stories, I feel like maybe I can go a little bit more without that parachute, but no. The short versions I hate. When I was just sketching notes for the story, that was sort of the feel I wanted to go for. And yeah, no, and they never suggested anything about changing the title or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I usually have at least a working title in mind, but I
Yeah.
understand that sometimes that might change. Are you saying that when you're working on so like say, like horror movie, from the very beginning you knew the title was gonna be horror movie,
Yes.
or okay?
Yeah.
Because if I remember correctly, Cabin, you initially had a different title for that,
Yeah.
correct?
So that's really with my string of books with Morrow, and geez, if we're counting the reprints of the detective stuff for up to like 11-ish books, so that's some short story collections in there. That's the only book that its title changed. When I wrote it, I was calling it The Four.
Right.
But quickly my editor's like, we need a different title. So I have one right away, which is a better title, The Cabinet at the End of the World. They did the book I wrote without a title was Disappearance at the Devil's Rock.
Mm.
Um, I mean, I had it as a possibility. It's what I don't want to say we settled on. I mean, it's a pretty good title, but again, it just kind of drove me crazy because I didn't have it at the beginning. But yeah, otherwise, I've only had pushback on titles on like one other book, Survivor Song. But I gave them a title that was worse, so they're like, "All right, fine, we'll go with Survivor Song."
You- Do
Well, I don't
you do
say
that too?
worse. I
I
should,
had to do that too for
yeah,
my recent Audible original. They're like, well, we have to make sure we clear it. Can you provide us with some alternatives? And I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, I just sent the most generic things,
yeah,
being like, no, I want to use this title. This is the title we need to go with. Unfortunately,
yeah,
we were
yeah.
able to do that. So, all right, well let's get into the new middle grade book.
Mm.
Um, Actually, before we talk about this, can we talk about that this is not your first foray into middle grade young adult type
Yeah.
fiction? Um, Tremblay heads will know that that years and years. Actually, how long has it been now that you and your friend Stephen Graham Jones
I think it was
published?
2010, 2011, one of those years.
Man, wow,
Yeah.
we're all getting old, Paul. I'll
Yeah.
tell you what. Floating Boy and the Girl Who Couldn't Fly by P.T. Jones was a book. At the time, was it kind of a secret, or did you guys just kind of make it very well known that, it was you and
Yeah.
Steven?
Oh no, we made it well known. Like even inside the book, I think it, lists our bios with our names.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I think we were worried, like, because we were trying to sell to the majors or get back to the majors in my case, that if this book didn't sell well, we didn't want it to like necessarily reflect on the names that we've been using. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was just sort of in some ways like a goofy decision we made 15 years ago that we wouldn't make now. Um, but yeah, that was part of it. It was just to have a little bit of fun. It was this independent publisher's first foray into young adult fiction. So a lot of it was a lot of fumbling around in general from everybody.
Prior to that, had you collaborated with anyone?
Just on short stories. I wrote a short story with a writer named Steve Eller. I'm trying to think if I wrote a few other short
Wow,
stories.
Steve Eller. I haven't thought of him in years. Is he
Yeah.
still around?
Yeah, he's not, he doesn't write, but oh yeah, he lives and he plays music and he was my HWA mentor back when I was in the HWA in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Remind me again, do you outline or do you really just kind of sit down with a character or idea in place and just go from there?
I've done both. Although I would say recently, like the last string of three, four novels, I haven't done outlining. Although I kind of feel like I outline as I go, like I keep a lot of notes and usually peer ahead a chapter or two as I'm taking notes. But my earliest ones, I did do outlines, and sometimes I was forced to professionally. Like
Yeah.
if I wanted to get back on book deal with Morrow, they said, hey, we need to see 50 pages in a summary, which was like the case for The Cabinet at the End of the World, also the Pallbearers Club. Both of those I sold before I finished them, so they need to see a little something.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the reason I ask is, I mean, what about Steven? How did, I mean, again, collaborating on a short story is one thing, but collaborating on
yeah,
a
yeah,
novel
right.
can be completely different. So, I mean, can you talk a little bit just about that process?
Yeah, I don't think he outlines it all. So we started just by just going back and forth. Like I had the opening chapter, and then we just passed it back and forth. And about 20,000 words in, we were both like, we don't know where this is going. So I was like, hey, maybe let's tag team write an outline. So I don't know if he's ever done an outline before or since, but we did that, and then we went back to the book and finished it that way.
And then again, this was, why middle grade or again, was this considered Y grade or middle grade or YA? I
Yeah, I
mean,
think
what
that,
type of,
I think that was considered YA because featured like freshmen or sophomores in high school, so
okay.
maybe on
Why
the younger.
specifically is it
Yeah.
like at the time so you knew that you were going to be using a pseudonym for it? I mean, did you want to kind of do a little bit something separate or like I guess why then YA and not just, collaborate on like an adult novel?
My original pitch to Steven was like, hey, my agent does really well with YA. And I was thinking maybe I should try to take advantage of that somehow. It's like let's try co-writing something, and I said. we could keep it very loose, no pressures. Like when you're working on one section, I can work on my other stuff, and vice versa. But the only problem for me was like I would spend like a week or two on my chapter, and when I sent it to Steven, he'd send me back his chapter like a day or two later because he writes so damn fast. But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed sort of the end product about, because we would rewrite each other's chapters too. So like by the end, you had this book that was like this weird amalgam of our voices. Yeah, and and Stephen was, lovely to work with. Obviously, I think the secret is to, if you're going to co-write with somebody, work with somebody who's better than you are. So I don't know
Yeah.
what Stephen would say. It didn't work out for him, but it worked out for me.
Well, I mean, your career has certainly skyrocketed since then, since what, like 15
Yeah.
years ago. So has Stevens. I mean, is there any discussion about maybe trying to re-release that under, actually your names?
Yeah, and Steven has been really re-releasing a lot of his older stuff, and it probably will happen at some point. But from my point of view, like I would want to probably rewrite it a little bit. So I mean, that takes a little bit of time. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure first, like we give another at least a year or two out there before we sort of throw something else new into the YA space.
Yeah. I had been, you mentioned before about just the fear of, sales and stuff following you. I had been invoking your name a little bit recently when we were talking to certain writers just about how
Yeah,
hard publishing is and how the fact is no one really knows anything. I chatted with Meg Gardner not that long ago, and,
yeah,
she's very famous the fact that for the longest time she could not get published in the United States. And actually it was Stephen King who really helped kind of make people aware of
yeah,
and it was China Lake, just no US publishers wanted it. Finally, when it was eventually published in the United States many, many years later, it won an Edgar Award. And then,
yeah,
of course, like look at her now. And even with you, I remember talking to you. I think last time we had chatted, or one of the times we had chatted, for your future crime novels with Holt
yeah,
just did not do as well, I guess, as publisher wanted. And so when you wrote Head Full of Ghosts and you guys shopped that around,
yeah,
there was interest, but ultimately a lot of passes because it was like, oh, based on sales.
yeah,
And if I remember correctly, you said it was like the second round of submissions that William Morrow, that Jen
yeah,
basically really fought for the book. And now look at you. You know what I mean? Like it could have been like sometimes it just takes one yes, but if you don't get
yeah.
that yes, you could, there's an alternate timeline where you're just, still, publishing in small press publishers.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's no
And it's
doubt. Like,
just, it's an insane business because like nothing, no one really can tell. And,
yeah,
just, yeah, it's, yeah.
no, for sure. Yeah, and with the Head Full of Ghosts, because we were pitching it in early 2014, it was a combination of his first books didn't sell well and horror. Yeah, because then like no one was really publishing horror or looking for horror in 2014. Aside from King and Hill and and then maybe someone like Victor LaValle, but he was more being presented as, oh, here's this literary writer, it just happened to be horror. So yeah, it's just kind of wild now to see how many horror novels are being purchased and sold now. Because in 2014, that was definitely like a mark against the book.
Yeah.
It takes luck, and what I've been telling. Actually, I just had this conversation recently with somebody. I always get asked like, "Hey, how does math help your writing?" Like, I don't know if it does, except for I always approached my writing. Well, first I approach as these are the stories I want to write, first and foremost. But I approach the career as like, hey, I'm just going to put stuff out there. And every time I put something out there, that's an opportunity. It's a chance. And, mathematically speaking, what you said is you need luck, you need the one yes. You're going to have more chances at the luck or the one yes by just continually, if you give yourself more and more opportunities. So whether that meant like in 2004, for 2 years, sending out hundreds of queries for a novel that never sold, but it took me 2 years to get an agent, whether that meant, as you said, a second round of submissions for a Head Full of Ghosts. To me, that's the part of it I always believed in was like, man, just give yourself enough chances, increase those odds to give yourself, for the one quote unquote break.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean it is a very frustrating thing that a lot of good and great novels oftentimes just do not get published for one reason or
Yeah,
another. Not because they're bad, it's just marketing, or maybe a book, or maybe a publisher had acquired a book very similar to that recently, and so it's
Yeah.
like, well, now we can't publish this book because we now have this book on our list. And I don't know. I always say that I love used bookstores, but sometimes when you walk around used bookstores, you'll see all these authors who had been published by really big name publishers, and then
Yeah.
you never hear from them again. I mean, again, you
Sure.
mentioned Steve Eller. Like I hadn't even thought of Steve for the longest time, and for
Yeah.
whatever reason, some authors just they do it for so long, and then they kind of just they stop and do other stuff. And
Yeah.
but anyway, I don't want to bring us down with thinking about the business
Yeah.
aspect of it, because again, as I always say, it's a very terrible business. It's one of those things that if you're a writer, you stick with it because you love it. You have that passion of
Yeah.
just telling stories, because it can be a very frustrating business. Absolutely.
Absolutely. At least it's not in
Um,
Hollywood. I was around some filmmakers this past weekend at a film festival, and hearing their stories is like, man, I mean, publishing is
well, here's
messed
the
up,
thing
but
too.
Hollywood's even more messed up.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this at the very least. A publisher is interested in your book. They purchase your book, or whatever you want to call it, option your book
Yeah.
or license your book. That they will publish your book. I mean, maybe
Right.
sometimes for whatever reason it doesn't come out. So much, and you've had a lot of stuff optioned. I've had stuff like
Yeah.
I just assume at this point, nothing is going to happen.
Right. Oh,
Like,
for sure.
like they will option it, but more than likely I mean, of course, you've had a movie made based on one of your books.
Yeah.
But the majority, like very few things actually get optioned. And then even a small sliver of that actually goes into production. And even going into production does not guarantee that it's actually going to be made. I mean, I was talking to what was it? Crime writer Jordan Harper. He had been a showrunner on LA Confidential for
Yeah.
CBS. They had done a pilot. God knows how many millions of dollars they spent doing this pilot with like Walter
Yeah.
Goggins, and then ultimately, CBS decided not to pick it up. So it's like all this
Yeah.
stuff, like, even if it goes into production, doesn't necessarily mean it gets made. Or if it does get made, maybe not, it might not get any distribution, and it's just like go
Right.
straight on streaming. And so it's a very, I can imagine, yeah, film TV is just as, although that is where the money is, I will say. They will throw around money like
Yeah.
crazy in that industry. Um, anyway, let's talk about this guy.
Right on.
Another. So, I was just thinking about this now. Obviously it's middle grade, and we're gonna get into what it's about and kind of like how you had to approach this separately to like a regular traditional, I guess, adult novel. But I would say that at least this is probably one of your more quote unquote traditionally told novels in quite
Yeah.
a while, because anybody who has read your stuff, you like to play around with like format and structure or
Yeah.
whatever else. This was very simple. Chapter one, chapter two, the whole way to the end. You weren't, I mean, there were some like text messages, but that's just standard nowadays. But it wasn't
Right.
like you were. So, can you talk about it? I guess like why? Like why now did you decide, you were having kind of a string of really successful adult books, like did you want to take
Yeah.
a little bit of a break? I mean, like what was the idea where you just wanted to get into, and for people who haven't read this book yet, there is a little bit of an afterward. We talk a little bit about kind of inspiration,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, can you talk just, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
what can you tell us about the book?
So, I've been a high school math teacher for 30 years at this point, same school. But I did take a year sabbatical when Knock at the Cabin was being made. So the academic year 2022 to 2023, I had it off. And during that time, I finished horror movie like 4 months early because I wasn't teaching. And then I don't know, like because I was like, oh, geez, what's next? I actually wrote a story for Amazon, like an Amazon original called In Bloom. But then I had the central idea of what became another, just at this, a weird image or a weird scene of an old guy with a burlap sack showing up at a lonely kid's house. And he says, "Hey, I've got your new playmate." And when he opens up the sack, inside is this like clay mannequin child. And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of weird." And it, wouldn't let me go. So that's usually my test, Robert. Like, all writers get ideas. And there's always the fear that, oh, like the new shiny thing, like you'll put something aside for the new shiny thing. So the way I sort of combat that is if I get a new idea, I don't write it right away. I might jot something down in my notebook, but I test it. I wait like at least a few weeks, sometimes months, to see if that idea just keeps pestering me when I'm not actively thinking about it. That's my test. I was like, okay, I need to write this. Um, So it wasn't like I set out to write like a middle grade. When I thought of the idea, I was like, oh, this kid's going to be 12. Maybe this would be a middle grade book. I don't know anything about it. I have a really great agent, so like I typically now these days I'm pretty lucky. I just like, well, I'm going to write it and let him figure out what to do with it. Um, and as far as like, there was no like narrative pyrotechnics, but partly because the story didn't necessitate its use. I really try not to make it. I try not to go into books thinking, oh no, I want to do something really cool typographically. I want it to happen organically. And since I'm so interested in it, it tends to happen anyway. So yeah, the book, as you mentioned, ended up being a little bit more. It's mostly linear. There's a couple of flashbacks, but yeah,
So
it's
did
there's
you,
no
yeah,
ambiguity. Like it plays with the supernatural pretty openly. Yeah,
yeah. So did you, when you have an idea like this, do you typically know in your head, because you've been doing this long enough, like how long it's going to be? I mean, this looks what, like 50,000 words, more or less. Like, I mean,
yeah, just about.
I
Yeah,
guess you knew that it wasn't going to be maybe like a short story or novella,
right.
like there was going to be enough here to at least get a quote unquote book out of it.
Yeah,
The same thing when you were approaching like the adult novels. Did you know, like, because like you've written a lot of short stories, so I know sometimes. Um, even with short stories, I don't know about you, but sometimes I kind of feel like, oh, this might be maybe about 4,000 words. Then it's like, oh, it creeps into more like 6,000 words. And
yeah,
but sometimes, when you're writing it, it's like dead on where you think it's going to be. I mean, so
yeah.
like, what was that a thing that you knew that, okay, this story is going to need more than just, 50 pages?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. Like, I've been weird until the most recent book. I've been like for novels, super weird accurate about what I think the word count would be. Once I had the idea and figured out like that this weird clay boy is going to spend some time at Casey's house with Casey, I was like, oh yeah, this will probably be 45,000 ish. So maybe it went over like by a couple thousand. Um, Yeah, I mean, so maybe sometimes it's some weird subconscious self-fulfilling prophecy where if you're thinking about this number enough that it hits there. That did not work with my most recent adult novel. I thought my that's coming out next summer. That book, I was like, oh, this is gonna be longer. It's gonna be like 95,000. For me, that'd be a long book. But then last April, I was at 95,000. I still had 4 chapters left. I was like, oh no. It ended up at like 130. I've never like blown past what like that, like I thought it would be. Um, yeah, but I mean, for compared to other books, I ended up writing it fairly quickly. Again, I had the advantage of not teaching at the time. I think it really only took me like 6 months for a draft. Um, maybe the last the last month or two was a little hazy because I had a concussion, but I still got it done. Um,
How'd you
yeah,
get
and then
a concussion?
it was the summer of 23. I had like a vasovagal fainting spell.
Hmm.
Yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I have to admit that earlier in the day I had been drinking and eating bad food. But, I just got up to pee and then it's the second time in my life I've had one of those like fainting spells. Sometimes you tell people get it from getting up too quickly. I also, because of my back surgery, like that I had, geez, 30 years ago, I've got like some stenosis, nerve pinching things. So, all of that just made me like pass out. And I didn't know I had hit my head on the floor because there was no obvious blood or lumps or anything like that. But anyway, so we're past that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then another happened, and the plan that I had was a little bit foolish, but it ended up working that way. In my head, I'm like, oh, I'll give him this middle grade novel, and then use that as, hey, here's the first book, and we'll offer you some adult books too. But that's not how it happened because I had to like with the middle grade go to a totally different publisher. Um, but I ended up
Was
getting
this,
another book
but it
deal
was
anyway. But yeah,
within like Harper, right? Like it
yeah, it
wasn't like you
was
guys
within Harper.
shopped it around to other publishers.
We ended up not shopping around to other publishers. Quilltree is within the HarperCollins. It's another one of their imprints, and the editor there, Rosemary Brennan, is very close with my adult editor Jen, and Jen strongly suggested we go to Rosemary. So, yeah, I was very glad it worked out. I take a lot of value in having everything sort of in the same house. I feel like that helps with the backlist, and I thought it would just help them like be more willing to push the book, which they certainly did. They sent me on a little book tour, which I think is pretty unusual for middle grade authors.
Yeah. So again, this is told pretty traditionally from the point of view of, well, I would say the majority of the point of view of Casey, who
Yeah.
is the main character in the story. Um, I guess like did you have to kind of change did you find that you were, knowing that you were going to be writing middle grade, did you find that you were changing up a little bit how you were writing, or did you just write it as like you typically would write it, just with the idea that this was going to be for, because I mean obviously you knew that obviously, you were going to have some of your adult readers were going to be finding the
Yeah.
book and reading it. And ideally, from what I could tell, there wasn't really any swearing or anything in the book. Obviously, there's no, violence. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess like how were you adjusting things? And was that something that was conscious as you were doing it, or it just came from the story?
Yeah. I mean, it's more like I really didn't approach writing it much differently than my adult stuff. The things like, because it's from the point of view of, it's not first person, but it's a pretty close third person of Casey. So, I guess I dialed back the vocabulary a little bit just to more befit sort of him. There's no violence, not because it's a middle grade, but because the story really didn't necessitate like a lot of violence. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a riff on a body snatcher kind of story. I did take out one swear. I had one in there. My editor was like, we should probably take that out. I'm like, that's fine. The thing,
What's like
yeah.
what swear word?
Oh, it was like, it was shit or something like that. It wasn't like
Oh,
a big
that's
deal.
not
Just
too
something
bad, but
like,
okay.
no, no, no. But yeah, so I was like, if that's a concession, fine. We can take out one swear. Um, the thing that I wasn't anticipating, even like before when we were pitching it, like, the publisher was, or the sales team was like, hey, we love this, but can you take out references to the pandemic because this will age the book? Um, which
And that it's
so
like
as
it's
writing
yeah,
advice, that's terrible. Maybe as sales, I don't know. I mean, maybe, in retrospect, I can sort of see, well, like we're trying to sell to like 8 to 12-year-olds now. How much are they going to remember of this time period? But
right.
ultimately, I said no. Like the book is thematically about what it was
Yeah,
like.
it kind of centers around that idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not didactic. It's not talking about the pandemic for a multiple pages, maybe 5% of the time. Um, yeah, so even like in the copy editing edits, they were like, "Oh, can you not mention YouTube and make up something else?" I'm like, "Wait, you want me to make up a video playing platform that does what YouTube does, but give it a different name?" It's like I'm not doing that. Like I just vehemently, uh, but before that even happened, like I've gone on rants before whenever people bring up like, "Oh, don't mention things modern because you're going to date the book." Like where the hell is where's the time, where's the line in our time frame that's the cutoff for timeless fiction? Was it like in the late
Yeah.
90s when we all had landlines? It's just absurd. There's no such thing. Don't. That's the
Well,
last
was
thing
that
any
more of a
writer should be
legal
worrying
thing
about.
that they were like, "Oh, don't mention YouTube"? I mean, like, what
No,
was the
no,
idea
nope,
for
no. It
certain?
was
Because
all
because
about
I've
we
because
don't.
I've seen that in other stuff. Like they didn't want to use like Facebook, so they called it like Me Face or something like that for whatever reason. It's like, well, why not just use Facebook?
Yeah, no. There's no legal thing at all. It's just more like, oh, what happens if that if that platform suddenly collapses? I'm like, okay, if it does, then that's when this book is
You know
set.
what? If
Yeah,
YouTube collapses, I think we're going to
yeah.
be in a lot more trouble than just a middle grade book.
Yeah. No, but I think it was more about like the idea of like, oh, you don't want to age your stories. Like, well, I'm trying to sell the story to readers now. I could give two shits about what people are doing 50 years from now, if there are
Yeah.
any left. I mean, I don't mean to be so flippant about it, but like, if I was lucky enough to have readers 50 years from now, I would hope that all the references in the book would just help build in their heads, hey, this is what this time was all
I mean,
about,
it's all, yeah, it's the time. I mean, people read Stephen King books and they talks about, Nixon was president. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
people will just, if it's a good story, I think it doesn't matter. It will just, live
right.
on.
Sure.
People aren't going to be like, oh, this mentions BlackBerries and not iPhones. I don't know about this. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, who cares?
No, I mean it's if those references are there because the story needs it, it's going to be fine. So it's like the difference between that terrible Ready Player One, where it's just all these references just to be, oh, look how cool I am that I know these references, as opposed to something like Neuromancer, Gibson's Neuromancer, whose opening line is, "The sky was the color of a dead TV or of a TV tuned to a dead channel." So maybe some readers may not instantly get that, but based in the context of what's going on in that novel, you're going to understand. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah,
So you do so this has some illustrations by
Yes.
who's the illustrator?
Sam Wolf Conley.
Yeah. Did you know going into it that like the idea was that there would be illustrations included, or was this something that came up kind of during the
Yeah.
publication process?
I had hoped. Yeah, I'm always too honest. Maybe this is too honest, but like in the negotiation, uh, I probably took a little bit less of a advance, to the point where my agent wanted to try to go wide. But like I'd said before, there was value in me in staying because I wanted like all my books in one spot. But so with my counter sort of counter ask, because the advance got to a certain point, was like, okay, I'm fine with this advance, but contractually, I would like 6 to 12 illustrations or something like that. And they were like, yeah, yeah, that's great. So I was super excited. I mean, I was so pleased to be able to get that. And his artwork is just amazing.
Did you request him specifically, or like how, or did you choose from a certain number of artists, or like how did he come about doing
Yeah,
specifically
so
this book?
they sent me, geez, I want to say maybe 5 different authors examples that they had used in-house. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if it was simply because of my choice, but they asked me my preference, and Sam was my preference based on what they had sent, and that's who we went with.
And did he also do the cover as well?
He did, yeah.
Because
No,
sometimes they'll have somebody do the interior illustrations might be a little bit different from whoever does the cover, is why I
right. Yeah,
asked.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nope. And they sent me an early cover that I didn't love, so then I think they went went to Sam after that. Um, but no, I mean, and Sam's work is beautiful. It's definitely value add to the book. It makes it a better book. I'm really honored, um, to have his work, to have collaborated with him, and he's been very kind about the book too. So yeah, it was that part of it was just like a dream come true. Like if I ever thought, hey, I'm gonna do a middle grade kids book, I would really love to have some amazing illustrations in it, and it totally worked out
And
that
so,
way.
did you flag certain places in the book where you thought like this would be a good place to do an illustration, or did he just read it and then come back with illustrations, throughout the book?
Yeah, if my memory serves correct, I think I gave like they asked, and I might have given like, hey, here's a few points where uh, an illustration could be good, and he might even have sent more than what was printed in the book. I forget how we ended up on the number, um, but yeah, I certainly was never like, oh, like I don't like this one. You have to draw something like this. I mean, once I got the illustrations, like, yeah, these are fantastic.
So, as your work for free publicist, my suggestion would be if there are extra illustrations that they can do, you guys should include them like in the paper.
Mm,
Make the paperback have like a few like cool extras or something.
yeah, I mean, that's usually what we've done with all my adult books. I've usually done something extra. Um, it even started with A Head Full of Ghosts at sort of my ask. Um, horror movie doesn't have anything extra on the inside, but they did a paperback that's really nice with different sprayed edges, so the outside looks like a film strip. My deep dark fear is I think sometimes I think my publishers um, sales plan is just to, they know they have a certain amount of people who buy my books and they just try to sell them as many copies of the same book as possible. I love you all. Thank you for doing that. But yeah.
So I always wonder, like personally for me, usually I just, I'm happy with like chapter one, chapter two, chapter three. You have like chapter titles in here. Was that something, did you initially have the idea of doing chapter titles for, throughout, or did that come, I don't know, like, yeah, can you talk a
Yeah, yeah.
little bit about the chapter titles?
Yeah, I think that was there right off the bat. It just, in the moment, it was just trust your gut, trust your subconscious kind of thing. Because I don't have very many other books where I've named the chapters like that. Um, with Cabin, I named like the parts of the book, but not the individual chapters. I'm trying to think
Yeah.
if I named other chapters. I don't know. It seemed to fit like it just seemed to be like, oh, a little pre-warning of what's coming. It seemed just like a fun thing to do. When the book was all done and when rereading it, it felt like that it fit. And then knowing it was middle grade, I thought oh, that might be good to have a little bit of a preview what's coming next, just to keep the young readers interested in what's coming next.
No. I mean, you strike me as somebody who tries to read widely, like not just reading horror. So
Yeah.
do you do you read middle grade from time to time? Like when you started this project, or were there certain books that you found yourself trying to read to kind of get a sense at least, okay, this is a gold standard in the middle
Yeah.
grade field.
So I have to admit, I didn't read a ton of middle grade, which was, I think, another reason why, like, when I approached writing the book, I just wrote it like the way I would write it and see what would happen. But that said, the book would not have happened without, well, Clive Barker's The Thief of Always is sort of like my favorite all-time, middle grade book. Um, but a couple of years before, friend and writer Mallory O'Meara had said to me, "Hey, you got to read Kenneth Apple's The Nest. It's just this middle grade book, but it's so great and it's so scary." I was like, "Oh," and I'm sure you get book recommendations all the time. But she went so far as to actually buy me a copy and mail it to me. It's like, "Oh, I guess I better read this." And it's this beautiful, almost pocket-sized book, and the art is amazing. When I read this book, I was like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know you could do this with middle grade." Because I mean, in my head, I think a lot of the middle grade I was seeing had like fun, almost
You're
cartoonish
thinking of the Hardy
covers.
Boys and Nancy Drew.
Yeah, but like even now, like you see fun, like cartoonish covers, and and the nest was not a safe thing. It went to dark places. It was complicated. It was beautifully written. Um, and it was scary as hell. Really, it's one of the more scary books I've read. So I was like, oh, in my head, I was like, I would love to try something like that someday. And so when I had the idea with Casey and the Clay Boy, I was like, okay, maybe I'll doing what Kenneth Apple did. Um, and since the fun part has been this summer, I did get to meet a lot of new to me and really cool middle grade writers. Lindsay Curry, for one. I just read an arc of her forthcoming novel, which is really good. So yeah, it's been fun. Post another coming out, sort of discovering, the wider middle grade world, and and reading middle grade stuff or YA stuff also that isn't necessarily horror either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talked about the book that you had written previously with Stephen Graham Jones. Besides that, I mean, is another like a one-off, or do you plan on maybe doing some more in the future?
Yeah, never say never, but I'm not actively looking for, to do it necessarily. Like, even another, it's not a huge spoiler. I leave an opening for like another story, but I'm certainly not planning on a sequel. When I'm done with teaching, maybe I'll have more time. Again, if I have the idea, I'll do it. I really enjoyed it. It was a fun write. Uh, and I'll be totally, but I will be totally honest and admit, like, man, they pay me way more for my adult novels. So it'd be kind of hard to take a break again from an adult novel to write a middle
Yeah.
grade novel, especially if I'm, subsisting myself on writing after that. But everything else, the experience has been amazing. The editor, Rosemary, was so awesome. She really was patient with me and, in the editing process and, Abby, with publicity. Yeah, they've all been great.
And you talked about before about titles. So another, was that from the very start you knew you wanted to go with
Yeah.
another, or like at what point in the drafting or publication process did this stick as a title?
Page one. I won't let myself type or start a book without a title anymore. It could
But
change
how
later,
about
I
the
suppose,
end?
but
Did
yeah.
did you know how the book was going to end once you started on page one, or was that kind of you
No.
had an idea where it was going to
Yeah.
go?
I had a vague idea where this was going to go. Probably more vague than other books. Yeah, so that was kind of, it was different to write with less of an idea of where it was going and really just sort of follow where the action was going.
So yeah, well, again, another recently came out, instant New York Times
Yeah.
bestseller. People can find this obviously, everywhere. It's currently a hardcover, ebook, audiobook. Um, let's talk a little bit before, with the time remaining, about the what's in store. Can you talk about? I guess I was a bookseller recently had a deal. Now that had been announced, but I guess this was more for the UK or like, yeah. Can you talk
That was
about
specific.
what's coming next year?
Yeah, so that was the recent bookseller was specific to a new UK publisher, new UK deal. So yeah, my next adult novel is called Dead But Dreaming of Electric Sheep. The title is definitely both a reference sort of to Lovecraft, but more a reference to Philip K. Dick. So this book is My longest book, I think, after some editing, it's about 115,000 words, so close to 400 pages. We'll see what they print, how many pages is when they print it. But on Microsoft Word, it's 400 pages. Yeah, and it's a mix of all sorts of genres. Obviously some science fiction, hopefully some literary humor, and hopefully some horror. I mean, I think it's by the end of the book, it's one of my most horrific, disturbing things that I've ever written. Um, but that's just me. Yeah, so it was exciting. It was hard to leave Titan Books in the UK, but I don't know. Just thinking about going forward a little bit. I think that I'll never leave horror, but I think I'm going to be doing more sort of like genre mixing. So I thought, it was hard to say no to Bloomsbury over in the UK. But it's the same publisher in the US. We're actually doing a book release next week on October 22nd, so you can keep an eye out for that. But
Oh.
yeah, super excited. It's sort of like an anti, not sort of, it is an anti-AI screed kind of book.
So, okay, so you said the cover is being released next week. So
Yeah,
do
there'll
we
be a
have a pub date,
reveal.
like what, or at least like
Oh,
what month people can expect the book to come out next year?
yeah. I mean, I assume this is what it is. I mean, if you go to Amazon, there's a placeholder, or even Bookshop too. It says June 30th,
Okay.
2026. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. And again, the title of that,
Dead but Dreaming of Electric Sheep.
I was just thinking like, well, what happens if the AI bubble pops before before the book comes out?
Yeah. Well, I'd be the happiest person in the world. If it means my book tanks, that
There.
I would trade the death of that book for an AI bubble popping. My worry is that what they're doing in the book might be real by the time the book comes out.
Mm.
But we'll see. Because the main conceit, I mean, this is in the sort of, if you go and see the book description, the main conceit is that there's someone who's my age, height, etc., working for a giant tech corporation on the West Coast. Definitely not Google. He works on their campus, and he had, in the mailroom, and he has a major stroke on campus. He isn't dead, but he's in a vegetative state. The doctors think he'll never be conscious. So this employee signed his body and brain away to the company, and so they implant AI and nanotechnology so that someone can remote control him like you're playing Xbox or something like that. And so the CFO's daughter, who's an ex-professional gamer, is hired to basically weekend at Bernie's him across the country. Uh, which, got a little bit of smile out of you. I hope a
Well,
lot of
I
that
mean,
part of
was that
this.
part of the
Yeah.
pitch?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like you use Weekend at Bernie's in the pitch for
Oh,
the
there's definitely a
publisher?
weekend at Bernie's reference, all throughout the book. Julia, even for the first half of the book, refers to the man as Bernie. Um, so while that's happening, I'm hoping there's humor there, in the ludicrous satire of it. The horror comes in whereas this unfortunate person is conscious because of what they've implanted in his head, and he's living through like a phantasmagoric hellscape. So that you get in two different sort of parts of the book, and then they all sort of meet at the end. Fun for the whole family.
One for the whole family. All right. So
Yeah.
the end of June, we're looking at the end of June next year,
Yeah, end
and
of next
hopefully,
June.
you said in a week we'll see what the cover is. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
You always have
No.
really good covers. Um, for the time remaining, you mentioned some books that you had read and really liked. Were there any other recommendations from, TV, movies, music, books, or any or short stories? Anything feel that you really
Yeah.
liked? You want to recommend?
Sure. So a couple of recent books. Let's see if I have them within reach. I have a couple that I'll mention that I can hold up. Um, So I recently, well, one recent book that I don't have in front of me, but John Langan's Lost in the Dark and Other Excursions is an amazing collection. And the title novella, Lost in the Dark, is as close to what I've read anyone successfully getting the same sort of feel that you would get from watching a found footage movie. It's sort of like a found footage
Hmm.
novella, and how he does it is really good, um, as always. And then Nadia Bulkin is one of my favorite writers. She has a collection of three novellas out now. Issues with Authority. She's just brilliant. She's someone who should be being published by a big publisher and on all the bestsellers lists. She's that good. These are really old stories, but with the help of Grady Hendrix, He really fought with Penguin to get the first three books of Blood by Clive Barker reissued, uh, which is great. Like Grady wrote a forward, and he actually asked for opinions from myself and a whole bunch of other writers. So I'm very proud to even just have like a little piece of that because the books of Blood were, as I'm sure for many horror writers and horror readers, so important. Movie wise, when I was at Telluride, I saw a movie called Dust Bunny. Man, that was like the most fun I've had in a movie in so long. And it plays as sort of like a dark children's fairy tale. It's actually rated R. It probably shouldn't be. Like this is, I feel like this is the only R-rated movie I wouldn't hesitate to take like a 10, 11-year-old to, because it plays with a monster under your bed kind of thing. There's a 10-year-old girl who believes she has this monster under her bed, and she does. And so essentially she hires an assassin to kill the bunny or to kill the monster. And the assassin is played by Mads Mikkelsen. And it's so
Oh.
damn fun. It's so funny. It's directed
Oh,
by
yeah. I saw
Brian.
the trailer for that. I
Yeah,
remember now. I forgot that's what it was. That's right.
yeah. It's directed by Brian Fuller. I don't know if you ever watched the TV show Hannibal, which
Oh,
is one of my
yeah.
all-time favorite TV shows. It's the guy who was the showrunner for that. So it's similarly just visually stunning movie and just so smart and fun. And Sigourney Weaver has an amazing supporting part in the movie too. So I can't recommend Dust Bunny more. I hope people go out and see it.
Was that in advance or is that out? I mean, that's not out yet, right?
Yeah, it's not out yet. I think it's out either actually, it is almost late October. I forget. It's maybe another two
Okay,
or three
sometime
weeks
this
before it
year.
comes out. Yeah,
Sometime this year. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about it. Didn't you mentioned before, I guess what was it? Grady wrote a forward for the Barker thing. Did you wrote a forward for one of the when they were re-releasing all the Straub books?
Oh, yeah,
Which book
yeah.
was that?
So yeah, I wrote a little forward for the Hellfire Club.
Hellfire Club. Okay,
Yeah,
that's right. Dan Shawn did Mr. X because for some
yes.
reason I was getting little Mr. X vibes. Just with the idea of like a doppelganger
Yeah,
type
yeah, yeah.
thing, in this. And I was like, did he get that from, having, okay, yeah, that's right. You did the Hellfire Club.
Yeah.
I need to reread that. I remember liking that a lot when I read that back in the day.
I was Peter is one of my favorite writers, and I'm lucky to say like towards the end of his life, we became pretty friendly. And so I still actually have some Stroud books I haven't read because I'm sort of like holding on to the idea that I'll still have some Stroud to read. And actually, Mr. X is one of them. That's a good reminder. I should pick up the Shown version. But yeah, I was part of me was a little bit worried because I knew the Hellfire Club was pretty rough. When I say rough, like the main character, Dick Dart, and I talk about this in the forward, sexually assaults the main character, and it's pretty graphic. But it's it I don't want to say it just serves the story, but the when I reread it, I was like, wow, this is great. This is, and there were so many other things going on that I didn't remember that I read the first time that I think the book actually resonates even more today than it did when I first read it in the 90s.
Yeah. So, all right, Paul. And then again, if people want to like stalk you online, where's the best place they can do that?
Yeah, so I'm most active by far at Instagram, so at Paul G. Tremblay, although I do use Blue Sky too, at Paul Tremblay, whatever, and then the Blue Sky.social, whatever it is. I've stopped telling people that when it first started, I thought it was Blueski because I don't know how to read. I still call it Blueski in my head sometimes.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, again, the author is Paul Tremblay. Her most recent book is Another, and look out for, I guess, next week, the cover for his new novel. Oh, Paul always has something new going out. What about short stories? You have any new short stories coming out anytime
Short
soon?
story. So I had an essay just come out, and it's not a short story, but an essay just come out in Becky Spratford's Why I Love Horror. Um, and so it's a whole bunch of contemporary horror writers writing about like why horror kind of thing. And for me, the fun part, I got another artist to do illustrations for me. Uh, this time, the artist is my daughter. Uh, she drew a super scary shark when I was
That's
talking about how,
good.
oh, yeah, no, she's a studio art major. She's a junior at a college in upstate New York and an amateur
Okay. For
tattooist.
some reason, I was thinking
Yeah.
like your 12-year-old daughter.
Yeah, no, no, no. Yeah,
It's
those
like,
12-year-olds. Come
okay.
on. Yeah. No, so I've definitely now that I've had more opportunities in putting Emma to work.
Was there, did you? if I remember correctly, or am I thinking somebody else? Did you and your daughter do something was there some type of? I mean, was this the project? I guess. Did you have
Yes.
something online? Was
Yeah, we got to go. We were interviewed by Boston's NPR station, WBUR, and they interviewed us about the essay. And it was a lot of fun. My only regret is like somehow I didn't take any pictures of us in the radio studio. But no, it was wonderful. And actually, geez, over my shoulder, can I mention one more thing? I
yeah,
don't know if you can see over my shoulder, that's poster art that she made. There was an anthology that came out earlier this year. I'm sorry, a documentary anthology that came out this year called First Word in Horror, put together by filmmaker Phil Gillette. Um, and Phil wrote like the first two seasons of Love, Death, and Robots, and he's also directed movies as well. But anyway, so he basically put together this documentary series where he interviewed five horror authors, myself, Stephen Graham Jones, Liz Hand, Laird Barron, and Mariana Enriquez. And we each had like a half an hour episode that he broke up into like 10-minute chunks, and he put it on Substack. But the only way to watch it is to subscribe to it. Although he just started putting the first episodes of each writer on YouTube for free to try to maybe get more people to go to Substack. But anyway, I mention it because for each of the authors, he commissioned an artist to make a movie poster style. So like, oh, it's a little bit far in the distance, but over my shoulder, that's the movie poster, and he hired my daughter to make it for my episode.
that's really cool.
Yeah, proud dad.
So next time when you do another middle grade book, you're gonna have to, get her to have the
Yeah.
publisher put the squeeze on the publisher and be like, you
Oh
have to
no,
hire
for
my
sure.
daughter,
No,
put that in the
I already have
contract.
a plan for not the adult novel coming out next summer, but the adult novel I just started. I'm going to commission a couple of things from her for that.
Very cool. Something to look forward to. So, all right,
Yeah.
Paul, thank you. I know you're a busy man. Thank you for making time and losing my voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, the new book, another everyone needs to go check it out and pre-order Paul's new one for next June. So again, Paul, thank you for hanging out, and we will
Thank you,
see
Robert.
everybody next time. Bye.